Back to episode 3 of our DayZ series.
Lonely man. That one guy you try to avoid at family reunions. The one nobody knows too well, but loves to talk about nonetheless. I think he liked me best because I never really enjoyed bad-mouthing him.
Oh, boy.
I wouldn't say we were close, but we tolerated one another. At least, that's how it was when I was little. We never bothered to stay in contact. I forgot about him by the time I left home. That's why the news of his death caught me completely by surprise. Uncle Mac was alone in his apartment when he had a heart attack causing cardiac arrest.
I don't even remember dropping.
He fell unconscious and died within a few minutes. And there was me at the time.
Why?
I just flunked out of college, and the only thing I was actually good at was playing video games.
You make it sound like something
When I was contacted by Mac's lawyer, I was even more shocked. Mac had left me 3 things. A box of sorted letters addressed to me, all the money he used to own, which to me was a lot, and his bar. The money he had inherited from his father and had worked at all his life. I'll be frank, I had no idea what to do with the bar, but I knew from the very start I'd take it over. I felt kind of honored. This had basically been Uncle Mac's entire life, and he was giving it to me, of all people. Sure, from what I knew, there hadn't been many friends or loved ones in his life to choose from, but it was still flattering to me. Once I read the first letter, I was even more convinced. Hi, Julia. If you're reading this, my bad eating habits have probably caught up to me. Or maybe someone killed me, who knows. As I'm writing this, you're 15 years old. You were the only one to talk to me at the family reunion today.
Oh my god.
Not for long, but more than just an awkward hello. I notice these things, and I appreciate it. That's why I'm trusting you with the most important task anyone in this family is ever going to offer you. You are going to take over my bar. Besides, knowing you, you're not going to have much of a career anyway, so you might as well. Once you're done reading this, please go to the bar at your earliest convenience.
Story I'm listening to.
Take the box of letters with you and stash it away somewhere there. It has some valuable advice you're going to need down the line. In fact, you will need to read the second letter right after your arrival. You'll find my employees are a bit special. Anyways, I hope you're doing alright, however this letter finds you. You're a good kid, Leah. Always have been. Besides, the only person
dies. Why is this not plugged in? God damn it. Sorry about that. I had a microphone die. So we're going to drop back 10 seconds. It's embarrassing.
Besides, the only person you could possibly disappoint by screwing this up is dead, so there's no pressure to impress. Sincerely, your Uncle Mac. I wiped my eyes. They had actually gotten a bit watery while I was reading the letter. I folded the letter and tucked it back into the box before grabbing my coat and bag. Mac's bar was a train ride and a 30-minute walk away from my parents' place, which is where I was residing at that moment. I figured I would probably have to look for a place closer to the bar if I really would start working there full-time. When I finally arrived at the establishment, it looked almost exactly the way I'd expected. It was just another wall in the row of buildings on the street off to the side from the inner city's market square. A large, bright red double door with a neon sign reading New Saloon above it. It would probably glow if I'd find how to switch it on. At least, I hoped it would glow. It felt weird unlocking the door and opening it for the first time all on my own.
I get stuck with everything again.
Entering and looking around inside felt even weirder.
I said or else I get stuck with everything again.
The New Saloon was your typical old-style dive bar. Even completely empty, it looked overcrowded.
What?
The fabric of the cushioned seats was stained and frayed. The walls behind and in front of the counter were plastered with neon beer signs and large framed photos of people I didn't know. Some were even in black and white. The floors were dirty and my heels stuck to them when I walked further in.
Why doesn't it let me take it?
This place was small, shabby, and smelly, and I loved it.
It doesn't let me take it out.
It was so strange, but I suddenly just felt like this bar was mine, and that I needed to take care of it and protect it. Remembering what Mac had told me in the first letter, I pulled out the second one from the box and unfolded it.
I'm so confused.
Hi, Julia. If you're reading this,
Yeah,
you're probably at the bar
now
for the very first time.
Out.
How do you like it? Let me guess. It's ugly and gross, but it instantly started growing on you. Don't worry.
Never seen
It's about to get a lot weirder. You'll find the entrance to the back room behind the counter. The light switch is on the inside of the wall. Make sure to turn it on before you head inside, because there's stairs leading down right behind the door. It's a death trap. Once you're in there, stand in the middle of the room. Stay away from the walls. You may then say out loud the following words. Spirits of this house, by the power of the spell that has bound you, I command you to serve. You'll see what happens next. Whatever happens, keep in mind that you can order them around. When all the work is done, simply tell them to go back into their room. You've got this. Sincerely, your Uncle Mac. I frowned. That was odd. Was this the prelude to some kind of joke? I walked over to the door behind the counter and pressed down the handle. It swung open with a loud creaking noise, and I began to grope around for a light switch. A single light bulb down in the back room came flickering on, and I proceeded down the rickety wooden stairs.
God. Why is cooking
No
so
banisters.
hard in this?
Risky, especially with the shoes I was wearing. By the time I'd reached the middle of the room, my heart was already beating faster than it should. Still, if this was a prank, Mac had been planning it for over 5 years, and I was not about to ruin it. Besides, no one was watching anyways. I cleared my throat. Spirits of this house, I began, a giggle swinging along in my voice. By the power of the spell that has bound you, I command you to serve. Nothing. Not a single sound for 5 whole seconds. I looked around the room. It was completely empty except for a single door in the wall across from me. Maybe I'd been supposed to say it in whatever room was behind that one. Just as I was about to walk over to it, a loud noise came from one of the walls to the side.
No,
I spun around to find that it had cracked open. Bits of it were beginning to crumble to the floor as the tear widened. I stared at it with my mouth agape, frozen in place and incapable of comprehending what I was seeing there.
If I'm sleeping alone, I'll sleep in here.
From the crack, a set of long, bony, pale fingers reached out into the room, gripping the inside of the wall.
I'll be sleeping alone.
My throat was too dry to produce a proper scream, but I couldn't contain a gasp as I staggered backwards until my back met with the other wall behind me. It was then that I felt cold palms rubbing against my neck and hands closing around my shoulders from behind. This time I shrieked. I whirled around again only to see that there was a hole there too. Long, skinny arms slowly moving forward from it, grabbing at me, searching for me. I glanced around the room frantically. Holes had opened in basically every spare spot. I counted 4 sets of arms pulling themselves out into the light, followed by similarly slender upper bodies. By the time I finally thought to run back up the stairs and save myself, the people from inside the walls were standing in the back room, fully emerged from their dark hideouts. I didn't risk another look at them. When I finally reached the top stair, I dashed back into the bar and slammed the door shut behind me. I pressed myself up against it just to keep standing. My knees had grown weak beneath me and I was panting heavily, my mind racing. Then I heard them. Slow, light footsteps making their way up the staircase, and stopped on top of it. I heard calm, steady breathing coming from the other side of the door. I tensed up and shifted my weight on my feet, leaning up against it to keep whomever was in there from getting out. I was sure this person would start to try pushing it open, but to my surprise, nothing happened. Instead, a voice rang out from inside. Excuse me, who are you exactly? It was a man's voice. I had expected something like a growl, or a hiss, or the groans of some decomposing zombie, but this was distinctly more articulate. It sounded almost polite. I didn't know what to do other than respond. Julia? I stammered. Julia. The man sounded surprised. What about Mac? Wait. Sure. He sounded quite sad now. Mac's dead, isn't he? Yes, I replied quietly. His heart stopped. That's... Good God. He fell silent, and I heard him utter a shaky sigh, almost like a sob. I'm sorry, would you give me a moment? I need to tell the others. Go ahead, I murmured. Never mind, they heard us. So, will you let us out now, or... Who are you? Why were you in there? Oh, we work here, actually. My name is Andrick. I do most of the organizing here. I take care of the accounting, our profits, our spendings. I place the orders on most of what we need. Back here with me, I've got Bo, who's our bouncer, and Danica and May, both waitresses. You work here? I repeated. And you live in the walls? After your shift is over, do you just go down there and melt into the room, or what? I couldn't help but let out a nervous chuckle at the mental image. This was just too absurd. At least I was breathing normally now. Pretty much, yes. I shook my head. What are you? Well, to explain that, you would have to go exactly 122 years back, so it's a long story, Andrick replied. All you need to know for now is that if you let us out, we'll get the bar up and running right away. We've been working under Mac since he took over this place, though, so you'll have to excuse us if we're a bit gloomy. No, that's fine, I muttered, slowly turning away from the door and carefully pulling it open. The man in front of me was of normal height, slender, and looked to be in his 30s. Despite being dressed in jeans and a simple black t-shirt with the bar's name printed on it in white swirly letters, he had a very official look to him. Maybe it was the way he stood, straight as a rod with a friendly yet matter-of-fact smile on his face. Thank you, he said. Turning back to the room, he raised his voice. You heard it, everyone. Mac might be gone, and while that's a downer, our work isn't over. So get yourselves up here and let's get this going again. His tone carried the flat motivation the coach of a youth sports team might have. 3 more people emerged from the back room, all dressed exactly like Andrick. All of them that same content little grin on their lips. They walked by me, offering polite greetings. The first one, a large, bulky guy, giving me a curt nod, and the 2 women that followed, smiling brightly. The girls were a little younger than Andrick, maybe in their late 20s. Both had blonde hair hanging down their shoulders and wavy pigtails. The first night the bar was open, I merely watched the backroom people work, following them around while they ignored me. It was eerie. They looked almost like automated mannequins, going about their routine by sticking to pre-planned paths. Like there were set directions painted somewhere I couldn't see. I soon began to notice other distinctive attributes about them. None of the people from the walls had fingernails. I saw it on the waitresses when they reached for the cups handed to them, on Andrick when he scribbled down notes. However, that was not the only thing off about them. All those little details in their faces, the kind of thing you'd normally never pay attention to, they didn't add up. For example, their eyes didn't line up. One was always slightly lower than the other, just enough for someone to notice. Their nostrils would differ in width, and one of the girl's pinky fingers was the same length as her ring finger. Had I not known that they just crawled out from the back room walls, I would have chalked these harmless little oddities up to simple, inconspicuous deformities. But knowing what I knew, it made my skin crawl with uncomfort. I soon found out that Andrick did most of the talking for them. Bo barely ever said a word, and all the waitresses did was whisper amongst themselves, giggle, and chat with the patrons. Eventually, Andrick waved me over to him behind the counter. Alright, I'll give you a rundown of the place. We have a cash-only system. We rely on our local clientele, but once in a while someone new comes by, and then we try and keep them around, obviously. Here's some of our regulars. He pointed at a lady sitting in the corner, weeping over an empty glass of whiskey. That's Shauna. Comes here whenever she can. Only ever orders whiskey. Will not stop crying. His finger wandered over to an old, short man with an almost disproportionately large head and short white hair. He was sitting at one of the tables as well, talking to two younger women who seemed very much out of place. That's Tommy. He's likely to start fights, but he drinks a lot, tips very generously. Bo throws him out a lot, but he's very easy on him, so don't worry. He finally nodded towards a tall glass of wine standing lonely on the counter right in front of us. And this is Irene. She can't pay, but she's always welcome. She's very nice, and she's been here ever since Mac's family started this business. Andrew, there was nothing there. The pale man threw me a confused glance. What do you mean, she's right? Oh, of course. Don't worry, you'll start seeing her with time. Either way, for now there's actually not much for you to do, except read up on barkeeping once you get the chance.
Thank you.
However, you should start getting acquainted with the regulars. After all, the owner of the new saloon will always be part of the reason why people come here. He paused as his mouth started to twitch into an almost guileful grin. I have a feeling they're gonna love you. I retreated into the ladies' room for a quick break. I sat down in one of the toilets and buried my face in my palms. I had no idea what was going on or what I was supposed to do. Andrick had made himself pretty clear when it came to the instructions he'd given me. But all this was so surreal, I seriously considered the possibility of me having suffered some kind of blow to the head and dreaming it. I spent the rest of the night standing behind the counter and observing their every move. Andrick kept to my side mostly, looking at me with the kind of suspicion I probably had in my eyes as well. I couldn't figure him out. I accidentally on purpose walked by the waitresses who were talking to each other in hushed voices, picking up on small bits of their conversation. Her blood is weaker than his. Do you think she's... We shouldn't take any chances. Remember what Mac did when we tried to test him? I do, but this could be our chance to have some fun. Her words sent chills down my spine. Remembering Mac's letter, however, I decided this was not the time to show I was frightened. He's going to do no such thing, I chimed in from behind them. I don't care what you are, but I promise, I'll find a way to make this whole thing very uncomfortable for you guys if you try to pull any kind of weird crap on me. The looks they gave me were worth my initial doubt. They seemed shocked that I had listened in on them at all, let alone spoken up. I glared at them, holding their gaze and ignoring the trembling of my legs. Their heads lowered, they marched off. When the bar began to clear out and we got ready to close down for the night, I told the four of them to clean up. Of course I helped, but I made sure to never lose sight of a single one of them. I felt like they were wild, hungry animals, waiting for their chance to pounce on me. Whenever I looked up from the rag I was wiping the countertop with, I would find one of them staring at me. By the time we were done, the place really did look a lot more welcoming. It certainly was cleaner. Despite the four workers' angry faces spoiling the mood. We carried the cleaning supplies back into the small storage chamber next to the employee restroom before I went to open the back room door for them. Okay, everybody, good job today. Thanks a lot, now back inside, I called out, almost enjoying the feeling of authority as they came trotting toward me and made their way down into the dimly lit basement single file. Andrick was the last one to cross the threshold. Right before descending the staircase, he turned to face me once more. You were keeping a close eye on us, he said quietly. That's clever. But you're gonna need to keep it up, and let's see how long you'll last. Who knows what might happen? He gave me a sly wink with the one eye that was a little lower on his face before following his coworkers. I watched from the top of the stairs as they leaned up against the walls. It was almost as I had expected. Their bodies seemed to melt into the holes they had come from, sealing them shut and not leaving so much as a thin crack.
Toilet.
Lacking a better option, I stayed at a nearby inn that night. As bizarre and frightening as all of this had been,
you got it.
I got out of it unscathed. The bar workers and I would end up coming to blows in the future, though.
What?
More than once. And I wouldn't always be that lucky.
That's Captain to you.
Not a lot of people visiting my bar are completely normal, well-adjusted individuals.
Captain, Commander,
it took me a long time getting on the same wavelength with most of our regulars. But I'll never forget the day I had my first close encounter with one of them. This happened when I was still quite green, as you'll see. His name was Cole. He'd been coming to the bar a lot since we'd opened up again. But Andrick said he hadn't seen him around that often before. A few times, yes, but he didn't know anything about him, save for his name. Cole would never talk to anyone. He'd keep his head low and order his drinks in a rough, quiet voice. He stuttered a lot. Once he'd received his beverage of choice, he'd sit down in the emptiest corner of the new saloon, where he would stay for up to 4 hours. I'd watch him from time to time.
What?
His head would always be hovering just a few inches above the table.
Yeah.
His eyes half closed. I felt sad for him. He looked sort of defeated, although I didn't know by whom or what. The fact that he drank a little more with every visit concerned me. I knew it wasn't really my place to snoop around in my patrons' lives, but I didn't have to be intrusive. All I wanted to know was whether he was okay.
Bite my tongue and just chill.
So one time when I handed him his beer, I simply asked. He stared at me for a split second, his eyes wide and watery before he broke down sobbing. He tried to keep it in at first, but eventually buried his face in his palms, tears dripping down his chin. I handed him a napkin before rounding the counter and walking over to him, waving for Andrick to take over for a little while. It's none of my business, I began cautiously. But if you want to talk... Yes, he breathed. That might help. I nodded, and we went back over to his corner booth. Glancing around, I assured myself nobody else was in earshot before sitting down across from him.
What was missing?
I didn't have to prod him for him to begin. I'm gonna have to kill someone very soon.
Jesus Christ.
He's taken everything from me, that bastard. But honestly, I'm scared. He lowered his voice. This thing, it's not... Wait, slow down, I said softly. What's he taken from you? Simply everything. My house, my job, my wife. It all started when I came home late from work to see the same car I own already parked in my driveway. The exact same one. Down to the license plate. I went inside the house, planning to ask my wife about it, but then I heard something. My wife's voice, but also another man's. I could hear them from downstairs in the living room when I came in. I sneaked up to the bedroom, opened the door, and there they were. My wife. And me. You? I repeated, frowning in confusion. Cole shrugged and took a sip of his drink. Oh, not me, of course, but he looked like me. He had the same birthmark on his back. And he even sounded like me. I've heard my voice recorded before, so while I didn't realize it right away, his was just like mine. Before you ask, I don't have a twin or anything. The instant I saw him, I knew he wasn't human. He was something else. I didn't know what, but either way, the two of them hadn't noticed me, and once I'd gotten a good look at him, I was too shocked to speak up anymore. Weak reaction, I know, but what was I supposed to do? I went back outside, and after a bit of thinking, I decided to call the police. When I told them there was someone in my house who looked just like me and I was scared, they hung up on me. Granted, I probably sounded like I was drunk or high or something, but I was not. You should know that. And I've never had any problems with my mental health either. That was just the beginning, though. I'm not a confrontational kind of guy, and I wasn't just going to barge in there. I was afraid, and then, of course, there's the fact he literally managed to trick my wife into...
Whoa.
I know I should have done something right away, but I just couldn't.
Tricked his wife into what?
I ended up letting it happen.
Oh, God.
That and so much more. I slept in my car that night. parked somewhere public since my spot at home was occupied.
Oh my god.
Cole let out a dry laugh and emptied his glass.
It's not funny.
You must think I'm crazy. I was staring at him with my mouth agape. I'm not sure what I had expected to hear, but this was not it.
Right.
This was terrifying.
This dude's
I believed
fucking
him, though.
twisted.
Knowing where Andrick and the others working the bar came from, the concept of doppelgangers didn't really seem groundless. I shook my head. I believe you, I replied quietly, my voice raw from my parched throat. I was starting to feel like I need a drink as well. Go on. Cole raised an eyebrow in disbelief before taking in a shaky breath. When I came into work the next day, he was already there. He was sitting at my desk reading through the papers stacked up there. I watched him for a little while. I kind of felt like something was draining from me. Maybe my energy or whatever. Sorry, I'm not good at storytelling. I suddenly felt incredibly hopeless, is what I'm saying. I waited in the corridor outside my office for someone to come by. I wanted to talk to my coworkers. Surely they'd noticed that there were two of me. When the place got more crowded, they did come by, but they all just ignored me. They didn't so much as look at me. Not even when I tried to speak to them. It was like I wasn't even there. And then I realized that my wife hadn't noticed me either, even though I'd been standing in the doorway right across from her.
All right.
Nobody I knew was noticing me. When I turned to look back at the other me sitting in my office, he looked right at me. The only one to look me in the eyes in that entire building. And he smiled. Again, I did nothing. I simply went back to my car and drove around, crying like a baby. I remember the new saloon, and that's how I ended up at your bar again. See, I have nothing else to do anymore. And no one to talk to, either. I don't have any siblings. My parents live overseas, and I don't have any friends who'd stand with me in this. And even if I had, they would have probably forgotten me by now as well. And this is the only place for me. He sighed and raised his glass. It was empty then, but I smiled at the gesture, though sadly. Cole tried to smile back, but his lip was quivering. It's warmer here than in my car.
Not
the drinks are cheap,
lost.
So I can just forget about everything for a little while.
At least I didn't get too far.
Besides, you guys here don't know me.
Into a wall.
And since only strangers seem to acknowledge my existence anymore, I'm grateful for at least being alive here. Being a person here, whatever. This thing pushed me out of my own life. I don't even dare to walk by my own house anymore because of how much it scares me.
Bag with me. Just bring it back.
And I still have access to my bank account, but who knows how long that's gonna last.
I'm carrying. Trying to
So
find
now,
a new home
you
in
want
the
to kill him?
town. A little more
course.
secluded, a little more
It's the
hidden.
only way.
Oh, the town is not
No
a safe
clue what he
place
is,
to
but
live.
I bought a gun from some shady guy selling weapons underhand. And I'm just gonna fire until that thing isn't moving anymore. I've been waiting for too long already. Once he's dead, I'll take over again. I didn't have much of a life, but I was with the woman I love, and I earned enough money to afford some luxury. My life wasn't busy or glamorous or anything, but it was good. And it was mine. I nodded. I didn't know what to say, so I offered to let him sleep at the bar that night, since it was warm in there at least.
Damaged.
Cole shook his head no. I appreciate it, but I have to start looking for a chance to...
I don't know if it'll make me sick.
It'll be difficult. I need to do it somewhere no one else sees.
Yeah.
And I need to keep my wife from finding out. I don't want her to
There's a high
know.
chance of damaged.
Maybe I should tell her, maybe I will someday, but
sick.
she'd have a complete meltdown.
Wow,
And I just want to keep her safe.
Here?
I'll be missing out on a lot of sleep from now on. And I won't be showing up here as often anymore, but this has to be my priority now until it's done.
So many of them.
Is there anything else I could help you with? No. I really don't want to drag anyone else into this mess. Who knows what's going to happen? But for what it's worth, thank you. It was nice having somebody listen to me. And look at me in the eyes, I suppose. He rose from his seat and handed me the money for his drink directly. I watched as he left, his jacket pulled tight around his shoulders. He gave me a quick glance before he disappeared through the door, the tiniest of smiles on his lips. Good luck, I called after him, catching a few surprised looks from my other patrons. Smiling awkwardly, I got up and walked over to Andric, who was just in the process of drying off a clean glass. He raised his brows quizzically. It's nice to know you're getting to know your regulars, but you don't always have to take that long. You don't have to play therapist for whoever comes in here, he told me. I sighed as I joined him behind the counter. I wasn't playing therapist. This guy just really needed someone to listen to him. He's got a bit of a situation. Say, do you know anything about imposters, like doppelgangers? Andric tilted his head. Well, a doppelganger doesn't always have to be just that. Usually an encounter with one is said to be bad luck, so in a way, they're harbingers of misfortune. However, what you mean is basically an evil twin. That could be anything. He rubbed the glass in his hands with a thoughtful look on his face.
So much food in that bag, I don't
Any
want to
being
lose
able to mimic something or someone can set its sights on you and try to push itself into your
I
life.
don't want to carry it everywhere I go.
However, very few succeed.
I'm not even hungry.
It'd have to be very powerful to deceive its victim's entire social circle. I mean, you'd have to get every detail about them down cold. And what if it can do that? And it can copy a person's belongings too, like a car or something. It'd have to be even more powerful to do that, Andric replied.
Oh my god.
By the way, I'll gladly tell you anything I know, but since your questions are very specific, I'm guessing this has to do with your friend from earlier. I nodded quietly.
Every time
Care to share exactly what he told you?
you're on your phone.
I'd rather not for now.
I can still pay attention.
No,
Can you kill
can't,
something like what you just described? Like, with a gun?
If you could, you wouldn't be saying
Andric let
what
out a
every time
mirthless chuckle.
something hits me.
If you could, life would be much easier for folk like me. But no, most certainly not. I dropped a cleaning rag I'd absent-mindedly been wiping the counter with and rushed outside, my heels clacking on the wooden floor. I burst through the door, ran past Beau, who flinched upon seeing me dash by, and called out Cole's name, shouting for him to come back. I walked the length of the street trying to find him. I had to warn him somehow. If what Andric said was true, he wouldn't stand a chance. Maybe he could start anew somewhere else instead. It'd be dying at the hands of that shapeshifter. After half an hour, I realized I wasn't going to find him. My head low, I returned to the new saloon. When I came in, Andric was still where I'd left him, but he now had an almost sympathetic look on his face. I took position beside him again. Go do something else, please, I muttered. Got this. I just wanted to be alone with my thoughts for a bit. I listened to the sounds of people chattering as I dried off glasses and cups, tidied up behind the counter, and gave out drinks. I didn't know Cole very well, but I'm the type of person who gets invested, I guess. At least I used to back when this happened. I overheard May whispering something to Danica as they strolled by. Can't believe Mac left us with someone this weepy. Or at least it was something to the tune of that. That just added to my mood. For 2 weeks, I waited for Cole to return. I hadn't asked him to, but I was sure he'd come by to let me know he was alright if he were to succeed. I was very busy with the bar and everything, but he was always on my mind, albeit in the back. And then, one day, completely out of the blue, Cole came marching through the door, his arm around the waist of a beautiful, well-dressed woman. My heart took a leap, and I beamed at the two of them, my chest light with relief. Hey, Cole, I said, barely able to contain the excitement in my voice, but keeping it cool since he had who I assumed to be his wife with him. After all, she wasn't supposed to find out about the whole incident.
Where'd they all go?
Long time no see. What can I get you?
Okay.
Hello?
You're tired of me?
He replied, drawing out the word. I could see a hint of confusion in his eyes. I thought this was your first time here, the lady muttered into his ear. He nodded, but kept smiling
politely. My stream interesting.
I frowned. Why didn't he recognize me? Furthermore, well, he could have easily forgotten about what I looked like. Why wouldn't he remember the bar? He'd been here time and again during the course of the evil twin ordeal. It took me longer than I cared to admit to put the pieces together in my head. During that time, all I did was stand and stare dumbly as the realization gradually started to set in, and my stomach slowly sank. Suddenly, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. And turning around, I found Andrick standing next to me. He eyed the couple over, but it was obvious he was focused more on the man.
I fall asleep all the time now.
Cole was beginning to look rather uncomfortable,
falling asleep.
almost angry.
My hands and arms have been falling asleep.
Eventually, Andrick raised his other hand and pointed at a sign behind us on the
Is it
wall.
your left?
We reserve the right to refuse service
I feel like
to
it's
anyone.
where I got my COVID vaccine.
This is a joke, right? Cole asked. It's not.
It just happened
Would you
to be the
please
arm
leave
my
now?
COVID vaccine was in. And I never
Andrick's
had
voice
it
was sharp.
until I got my vaccine.
I was starting to get nervous.
Pipe some floor, I gotta go.
To my surprise, he squeezed my shoulder upon feeling it tremble. You know, you can't just throw anyone out, right?
No, but no,
We didn't do
it's
anything.
been months I've been alive. Bye.
Not you, as in the two of you,
I love you.
but you, as in just you. The lady may stay if she wants to.
Well, if I'm
What did I
not,
do?
we'll look at the stream.
Do I
You'll see
smell?
if I'm busy. But
Cole let a incredulous laugh as he glanced around the
if I
bar.
miss your text,
Almost
check
like he
my
was looking for
stream.
support among the other patrons.
You can always say, hey, check
What
the
did you do to
text.
him? I pressed out. It wasn't a smart thing to ask outright, but I just had to. Is he alive? I don't know what you're talking about. Andrew cleared his throat. As you can see, your presence is distressing her. Please leave now. He said this with a deadpan look on his face, his voice flat and steady. Cole's wife looked at us like we were crazy, but I could see an angry gleam in the eyes of the imposter as he turned around and made for the door, mumbling something to the lady about how nuts we were. Wait, I screamed, realizing this was my last chance to warn her. That man is not your husband. The lady turned around, giving me an odd look, but she didn't stop. Instead, she picked up her pace a little, approaching the exit in a hurry. That's not Cole, I shouted, frantically trying to get the words out as, he's dangerous. I felt Andrew cover my mouth with his hand, pulling me away from the counter and grabbing one of my flailing arms with his other one. You're gonna get angry, he hissed into my ear. I struggled, trying to get over to the woman, but Andrick was stronger than he looked. By the time he let go of me, Cole's wife was gone. I looked around. None of the patrons had gotten up during my screaming fit. Like they hadn't even noticed the crazy chick going off at all. Andrick had a bitter smile on his face. I know the kicker. This happens like thrice a year around here. I still remember a very short letter my uncle left me that kind of relates to what happened back there. It read, Dear Julia, you're nobody's savior. If you try to be, you'll either get yourself hurt or you'll see someone you care about get hurt. Both suck, so keep your distance. Sincerely, your Uncle Mac. My bar is a shabby little thing. Not only does it naturally attract the weirdest patrons, it also never fails to surprise with just how dilapidated it is. One time, I nearly sprained my ankle tripping over a loose floorboard. The back room people and I try to fix the place all the time, but it's like new issues pop up everywhere. We repair a lamp in one of the bathrooms, and next thing you know, another one goes dark. Kind of like that. It wouldn't surprise me if the building was cursed or something. There's upsides to it as well, though. Sometimes we find cool stuff while cleaning. Change, for example. Or in this particular case, a shiny, thin silver necklace with a crystal pendant. Andrick found it while sweeping the floors. May's excited squeals were what alerted me to it. Oh my god, it's so pretty! Weird. Since when do our patrons have jewelry on them? Chimed in. He rarely says anything, so I remember being surprised at that. Andrick? May began, drawing out the name in a saccharine voice. Can I have it? Sorry. All items found in the bar are at the disposal of our dear lord. Lady. He handed me the necklace, and I held it up, considering it. Well, someone probably lost it. We'll keep it here and see if they come back for it, I decided. And what if they don't? May inquired, a hopeful look in her eyes. If that happens, then I'm gonna start wearing it, I said, smiling as her face fell. I totally would let you have it, but I just don't like people who put up tripwires for me to fall over. May had pulled that actual stunt just a week prior, and I'd almost broken my neck. And that's why you don't bite the hand that feeds, Andrew told her in a hushed voice, though I'm sure he fully intended for me to hear. I know it's not good holding grudges, but it was extremely satisfying. The backroom people love playing pranks. I'm used to it. And Andrick isn't as much of a saint as he makes himself out to be. He once emptied an entire bag of potato chips over my head. But May's ones have always been a bit more aggressive. A week went by as we waited for someone to return for the necklace. Then another. I eventually gave in to the desire to declare this sparkly thing my own, and simply put it on one day. Suits you, Andrick said curtly. And with that, the matter was off the table. We all just collectively forgot about where it had come from. That was until I came into the bar one morning to find all the chairs and stools had been stacked up in the middle of the room. One large, sturdy pile of furniture that kind of looked like a jungle gym built by someone who hates kids. I already mentioned my employees liked to play pranks on me. But when I had ordered them to return to the back room the night prior, the chairs had all been in place. As far as I knew, none of the four could leave until I waked them up again. So, this couldn't have been one of their practical jokes. I rounded the enormous stack, examining it, only to find nothing hinting of its creator. Andrick? I called out. Are you guys up yet? No response. They were still resting, apparently. I stepped up to the door behind the counter, pulled it open, and turned on the lights. Spirits of this house, get up already. I watched as the four of them crawled out of the wall. Just between us, sometimes I make bets with myself about who will be out first. This time it was Danica. She stretched her arms and waved at me before walking up the stairs, closely followed by the rest of them. That's new, Danica said when laying eyes on the pile of furniture. Did you do this? Why would we do that? You just make us put everything back, Andrick replied. I shrugged. He made a good point. It was still fairly unsettling, seeing as if it had not been them, someone else must have gained access to the bar overnight. We tidied up everything, and Andrick told me not to worry. Weird things happen here all the time, he explained. Always have. It's probably nothing. If you say so. That was only the first of many incidents, though. That same night, the bar was pretty full for once, and we were watching a game on that small flat-screen TV above the counter. I'm not a sports person, but since a lot of the patrons seemed to be paying attention to it, I got sucked in a bit myself. That was until the screen began to flicker and suddenly went out. I could hear disappointed groans coming from several tables, and some guy shouted to make it come back on. Andrick shot me a confused look as he reached for the remote. Neither of us knew how odd this was. TV was the one thing about this bar that had never failed us before. I watched as he pressed a few random buttons, then tried to turn it on and off again. But it didn't react. He groaned and swung himself up on the counter with surprising agility, beginning to fumble around with the back of the TV. I don't know what he did exactly, but eventually it did come back on, transmitting the cheerful sounds of the game. There, Andrick muttered as he climbed back down. I sighed and got ready to clean the counter where he'd stood. Suddenly the loud noise of static cut through the air. I hurriedly glanced up at the TV again, just in time to see a face staring down at me. I couldn't see much of it, just two large gray eyes. The rest was obscured by a thin white bedsheet the person had wrapped around their head and shoulders. Just a second later, the game was back on. I turned around to face the patrons. Did any of you see that just now? Some nodded and waved me off like it was no big deal, while others didn't react at all. Andrick looked at me with his brows raised. I just shook my head. I decided I would probably have to stop jumping at every small thing happening here. If I'd end up being only nervous all the time, people here would lose whatever little respect they hopefully had for me. As the days progressed, however, these things kept happening, and they got more and more extreme. I would find the tables turned over when coming in the mornings. One time, 5 of the old bottles we kept behind the counter had been smashed. putting to waste some of our higher quality drinks. And Lord knows we don't have much of those. Our electricity would keep having these little dropouts, and while those never lasted, they would occur often enough to annoy everyone. Worse yet, I kept seeing that face. Every time I turned on the TV, or sometimes even my phone, the image of those large eyes wrapped by that same white blanket would flash up on it for only a split second. Then, one night, Bo came up to me while I was standing behind the counter. "Hey, we've got someone sneaking around outside, I think." I looked up at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I keep hearing footsteps, and the trash can behind the wall's fallen over twice now. I picked it up both times. I also saw a person creep around there. A really short one, dressed in something white. If you want me to go follow them, I could, but I'd have to leave the door unwatched." I felt a shiver run down my spine at his words. "Please check up on it. I'll keep an eye out for the door while you're gone." "Got it." Bo gave me a nod before disappearing outside. I quickly bent down to grab my uncle's box of letters from where I'd stashed it away behind the counter. I had admittedly been a bit lazy with my reading. I had only gone through about 2 more at that point, and neither of them contained any advice on what to do when you'd have stuff like this happening. I hurried to grab and scan a few random letters for information, only to find nothing. Upon realizing that if the bar spirits didn't know what was going on, Uncle Mac probably wouldn't have written about it either, I gave up and instead walked up to the door. I stayed there for a while, but I didn't make for a very good bouncer, especially compared to Bo. A look at my watch told me I'd been waiting for 10 minutes already. I was starting to get concerned. Bo literally should have been back by then. Eventually, I cleared my throat and called out his name in a shaky voice. No response, except a strange noise coming from somewhere to the side of the building. There's a very tight little alley between the bar and the house it borders onto its right. It's a dead end, and it's where the trash can Bo had mentioned was located. I figured maybe he'd gotten stuck there somehow and needed help. It was hard to imagine anything happening to him considering his enormous stature, but it wasn't impossible. I went behind the counter and grabbed one of our large cutting knives, concealing it inside my handbag before waving Andrick over and letting him know about what was going on. I told him if I wouldn't be back in 20 minutes, he needed to call the police, but refrained from going outside himself. Thankfully, there were only 3 people inside the bar at the time, and they were all huddled up in one corner focused on a game of cards. At least they wouldn't notice something was up. I walked outside, the cold air hitting me like a splash of water. This didn't feel right. I tried to keep my steps as quiet as possible. Every time one of my heels met with the cobblestones below, I felt myself wince as the hair on my neck stood up. I had already buried my hand in my purse, clutching the handle of the knife. I rounded the corner and looked down the alleyway. What I saw made me freeze. Bo stood at the very end of it, right in front of the wall. He didn't move or speak, but he had visibly tensed up, staring only at the figure kneeling on the ground a little bit ahead of him. There, next to the overthrown trash can, sat a young girl. And she was wrapped from head to toe in a large white bedsheet, veiling her in a way that left only her head and bare feet sticking out. She was holding the blanket in place with one hand, while rummaging through the trash that had spilled out from the small container with the other. My eyes remained glued to her for 10 seconds, which felt like an eternity, before Bo suddenly made a surprised noise. I looked up only to find that he had noticed me. His eyes darted between the child on the ground and myself, and he almost seemed to mouth for me to get lost. The girl raised her head. Turning to Bo, she said in a very quiet voice, "Didn't I tell you to stay still?" He immediately froze up again, and she lowered her head, once again focusing on going through the trash. Bo silently raised a finger to his lips. I nodded. She hadn't seen me yet. I didn't know why he was so afraid of her, but I could tell something about her was very wrong. It was not just her blanket, or the fact that she was outside without any shoes on at this time of the year. It was how she felt. When you have a person standing beside you, you can sometimes feel their warmth, and you can see the life in their eyes. It's an odd thing to say, and I can't properly describe it, but you're simply aware of their presence one way or another. This little girl did not feel real. It was like I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. It was this alien sense of unease that caused my stomach to churn. Bo slowly took a cautious step toward me, placing the soft soles of his shoes as lightly on the ground as he could. It looked almost like he was trying to cross a river by balancing his way over on an old wobbly bridge. When he finally reached me, he grabbed me by the wrist and began tugging me back towards the bar's entrance. That very second, the girl's head jerked around as she stared at us with wide gray eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, her high-pitched voice shrill and aggressive. She rose to her feet, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, as she slowly took a step toward us. Before I could answer, her eyes narrowed and she let out an ear-piercing screech. She lunged at me, throwing me to the ground with a strength I would have never expected from her. I screamed with pain as she pushed my head against the stone ground, and for a second or two, everything went black. I could hear Bo growling as he tried to pull her off of me, only to be shoved away. The girl forcefully turned me over, throwing herself onto my back and starting to scratch the back of my neck. "Get off!" I whined. "What are you doing?" Suddenly, I heard a tiny clinking sound and felt something scrape my throat. That's when I remembered the necklace. She had been trying to take it off. Now that she finally had it, she crawled off of me. I groaned, slowly turning around to look up at her. She was sitting on the ground beside me, staring at the shiny necklace in her tiny pale hand. And she was incredibly calm all of a sudden. "Thank God. I've been looking for this everywhere," she muttered, talking more to herself than to me or Bo. "Mom found I'd taken it out to play. She found out I lost it. She would have been so angry." She slowly raised her head and looked down at me, something akin to a smile on her face. "Mom loves her jewelry. She hates when I touch it." With that, she got up and, necklace in hand, jogged over to the end of the alley. She was heading right towards the wall, and just as she should have been about to run into it, she disappeared. She didn't fade out or anything, but one second she was there, and the next she was gone. I stared after her with my neck craned for a good 2 seconds, before starting my first fruitless attempt to get up. My whole body was aching, and I let out a small whimper. Bo rushed to my side and shoved his arm beneath my shoulders to pull me up. But he was rough, and my sides flared up with pain. He apologized and ran back inside the bar, returning with Andrick at his side. I chuckled as I looked up at the both of them, tears of pain in my eyes, yet at the same time weirdly amused by the sheer absurdity of the situation.
I could die.
"What happened?" Andrick asked softly, leaning down to help me get to my feet.
Kill you.
"Ask Bo later,"
I'm back bleeding.
I muttered, whining as he propped me up. "Didn't you have a necklace on you?" "Wasn't mine. Give it back." The two of them half led, half carried me inside the new saloon. I contemplated going to the hospital,
Me
but
too.
then again, nothing was broken, and as far as I could tell, it was just bruises. We closed down early for the night, and I sat down in one of the cozier dorm booths.
I'll come back.
I didn't get up until morning.
Come on.
I really did end up spending the night in my shabby little bar, my head resting on a table
Probably
the back room
bleeding.
people had thankfully cleaned for me.
Come on.
It was nice having them all be polite at the same time for once.
Oh my God.
I didn't sleep the entire night, though. I asked Danica to bring me a pen and paper,
This is bullshit.
and then told them they could go into the back room and rest if they wanted to.
That was bullshit.
And to my surprise, some of them stuck around, though. Bo went straight downstairs, while May stuck around to watch TV. I had brought a couple books with me, and Danica had borrowed one on small business, which she was reading a lot more diligently than I ever had. Andrick had sat down on the cushioned bench with me, and was watching me ponder over my pen and paper.
Like, that's not even
What do you want to write? Since none of you knew about the little girl with the blanket, I've been thinking the letters Uncle Mac left me might need some additions. Andrick laughed.
Finally. I'm not
You haven't even finished reading them.
That's good.
True. But I hope whoever gets the bar after me will be more up to the task.
Ruined.
Hey, since you're here already, you should help me out.
My pants are gonna be
You knew about doppelgangers, so what do you think about
guns
this?
are out of ammo.
So now there's a letter from me somewhere in that box among those that Uncle Mac left me. I won't transcribe it exactly, since I just wrote down the better part of everything I know above, but
not lose all our guns.
here's what I added with Andrick's help.
You get knocked out.
It's possible she's a poltergeist. However, she apparently isn't bound to any person in particular, and has no trouble showing herself in the same form for an extended period of time. Poltergeists are said to be more likely to haunt a person than a location,
to kill.
which we're not sure is the case with her. She seems to have detailed memories of a past life, mentioning her mother as the reason why she was after the necklace. We don't know exactly how that got into the bar, by the way, but in the end, we're just glad to be rid of it. And so if you find any piece of jewelry in the bar that looks like it doesn't belong, just stash it away somewhere the girl can easily find it. Please don't make it hard on her. She seems really confused. It wouldn't be the last time we'd meet her, though. You might remember some of the regulars of my bar, the new saloon.
Not cola.
This is actually about the crying lady who always orders whiskey here, Shauna.
It's not a cola.
For a long time, I didn't know anything else about her.
For a reason.
Since I'm not retelling these stories in chronological order, I should probably mention that this happened before the incident with the little girl. It was not long after the whole ordeal, though. What you need to know is that sometimes I have these little sudden spurts of excitement and curiosity.
Let's go back to her.
One day, I experienced exactly that.
Shit.
And the object of my interest was the sobbing lady in the corner. I stood around watching her for a while, unsure of whether I should go over there or not. I wanted to talk to her, but I was worried it would upset her. I asked Andrick what he thought, and he said just to try. And so that's what I did. I walked over to her, another glass of whiskey in hand.
Heard me by now. I'm probably
Excuse me, Shauna? Hi. She looked up at me, her long, flowing gray hair framing a wrinkled, puffed face. Hello. Are you Julia, right? I am, I replied, placing the glass in front of her. On the house. Can I sit with you? Yes, sure. She whispered, her voice shaky and stifled with tears. I smiled and sat down across from her. Up close, her eyes looked even sadder. I cleared my throat. I hope you don't mind me asking, but why are you crying? Shauna stared at me for a few seconds before lowering her head again, giving way to more heavy sobs. Her shoulders were shaking, and there was spittle running from her slack lower lip. Little Brendan. I started with little Brendan. It was the first one.
Yes.
The first one I cried for. That was so long ago. So long ago.
I saw me and take a make play.
Over a century, maybe even two. I winced. I hadn't expected her to start talking this freely, much less about something that happened 2 centuries ago. Part of me wondered if she was simply confused or a little crazy. But at that point, the experience a certain patron had had with his doppelganger was still fresh in my mind. So who was to say this was impossible? I'm from a hill. From a mound, she went on, her voice barely more than a whisper. I ascended from it. I need to warn them. I need to warn everybody. But I need to mourn them too. I've given up on the warnings.
Alright, guys.
It happens everywhere, but...
We're gonna stop it here. Well, we're gonna keep going, but this episode we're gonna end here. Like, comment, and subscribe, and come back. This is episode 3.1. 3.0. How'd you say it? 3.0? 3.1. Alright. We'll be back.